by grassroots groups all around Wisconsin for these folks. And so I'd like to get a round of questions in, starting with a question from Diane Hasselbein. Hasselbein,
County Board Supervisor.
from Middleton Action Team. And her question for you, Kathleen, is Wisconsin has extreme polarization with Scott Walker refusing to talk with any of those in the minority. If you were elected governor, would you try to work with the Republicans on any issues?
Thank you. And again, I've got a long track record. I know when you fight, and I know when you got to reach agreements with people. And let me give some examples. You know, I spent 20 years as the environmental lawyer helping citizens all across the state, and when you in Dane County elected me county executive 15 years ago as the environmental advocate, remember it was against Mike Blaska at that time? And Governor Thompson had been helping Mike Blaska at that time. I knew that we had two choices of how to move forward. I can either be the environmental warrior county executive and we'll be fighting the realtors and fighting the builders, and you know the interest on the other side, and on any given Thursday night they may win, and on any given Thursday night we may win. But meanwhile, Rome is burning. Dane County is growing by 60,000 people a decade. And while we quarrel on a Thursday night, we're losing the county to sprawl unless we do it a different way. And so I thought my job for you was to get the job done and protect our county. So the day after the election, I called the realtors, ding-a-ling-a-ling, called the builders, ding-a-ling-a-ling, and said, I'm calling not to gloat, just the opposite. I'm calling to ask for you to give me a chance to work with me, because people just elected me because of the vision here of protecting our county, fighting sprawl, cleaning up our lakes, protecting our farmland. Will you give me a chance? And they said, okay. They were stuck with me for 4 years. But they said, okay. So then my job was to find a way to get us to work together where people don't have to give up their highly thought views, because who wants to, right, Jim? But I knew that if you asked people in Dane County, including the realtors and builders, what they wanted our county to look like, that we'd want the same thing. Clean lakes and streams, strong farms, great 60 different communities of all different sizes. So my job was to get us there. So just to finish the example, I want to respect time constraints. 15 years ago then, picture, there was nothing more divisive in Dane County than land use and growth issues, nothing. And so I opened up the Alliant Energy Center, Exposition Hall, you've all been there. Many roundtables set up, opened it up for a public hearing, and Jim, you probably were there, and many others, some in this room, and just said, come on, we're going to talk about land use. And so people from Card Carrying, Sierra Club, and the other side came. And they'd all sit down on these round tables, and I put a map of Dane County in the middle of every table with a bowl of M&Ms and said, don't eat them yet. And I knew the Card Carrying Sierra Clubber would sit next to the rabid developer, because then they could kind of needle each other, because that was what happened all the time. And so I said, okay, now everybody put the M&Ms on the map of Dane County where you want the development to happen. Well, they're ready to go, right? They put the M&Ms, and they're putting them in the same place. And they looked at each other like they had never seen each other before. Because but for our philosophical differences, we were forgetting we wanted the same thing. And so then my job was to now find something for us to work on together that reflects that both sides will feel proud of. And so I came up with the idea of the conservation referendum. I knew you'd vote for it in a heartbeat. I knew you'd vote to tax yourselves more. But what it did was it had both sides working together on the same thing, getting it done. And at that night, I'll never forget election night in spring of '99, when we're all standing there, this strange alliance of folks who didn't normally agree on the day of the week. They said, okay, Falk, now what do you want us to do? And out of that came the next 12 years of the first, the only, or the best environmental protections in the state, and some of the best in the country. And that's how I got it done. That's what I did.
Okay, the next question comes from Dick and Sheila Plotkin of Active McFarland, and this is for you, Harry. TV ads for politicians tell half-truths or outright lies. Walker has unlimited funds for such ads. Can we offset them with citizen boots on the ground telling the truth? If you believe we can, how?
I think we can, the truth remains truth and truth is eternal. And that remains the fact. So I think we can overturn the political ads and the falseness by simply telling the truth, by using people as our voices, using social media, using internet, and using engaging community just like we are doing here, and engaging grassroots organizations and engaging people throughout the state. It will be necessary to place correctly, surgically placed ads, and just like he is doing, but not as widely, because it's probably going to be difficult to compete, to state the facts. And I think people are reasonable, people will accept and understand fact-based information that's provided with them.
Okay. This is also from the Middleton Action Team, from Kathy Stella, and this is for you, Kathleen. Assume Walker loses his recall election, and soon both the Senate and the House become controlled by Democrats. In what ways will you govern differently than Walker? Please give specific examples.
Well, the first thing I would do is talk with all of the people of the state, not just the people that elected me. I think one of the things that was most frustrating for us when we were in Illinois was that over and over again we asked the governor to talk with us and offered solutions, and he would give the illusion that he was talking, and then 15 minutes after his people got off the phone, he would be in front of the cameras in Madison saying that he was absolutely not going to negotiate. So it's a dishonesty, it's a disingenuous approach. What we need to do is bring people together and begin the healing that has to happen. And I think the best way to do that is to create as open a process as possible. A lot of the very bad things that have happened late at night in rushed bills in ways that people were not involved in the process. And a perfect example, of course, is what's happened this week with the mining committee, the dissolution of the mining committee and no hearings at all. And when there were hearings even scheduled. When I talk about the following the process is there. It's very important. And if we bring everybody to the table and work out our differences, everybody, and I'm not just talking about the people that you agree with, but everybody. If we bring everybody together, that process takes time. And especially with a big bill, whether it's Act 10 or the mining bill or all of the other issues, healthcare, all the other issues that we have to deal with. It means a governor who's willing to go out in a forum like this and have town hall meetings and have a discussion among the people about what the people want all over the state, not just in Madison. And I do believe that Senator Miller has this saying that I'll borrow from him, that he says that the public process is so important that you have to think of legislation as like fish. You have to open up the wax paper and let it sit on the table and let the sun shine on it and see if it stinks. That public process is very important. And we're not all going to get what we want. And I fully expect that I'm not going to get all the legislation that I want in exactly the way I want it. But the most important thing is that there is harmony. And harmony, think about harmony. Harmony means we're not all singing the same note, but we're all in tune together. And that can happen by bringing people into the process and respecting the rules.
Okay, we're going to take a moment here. I have a question that I would like to ask all the presenters, but I would like to give a few moments to Mr. Charles Uphoff that he could talk to you because he has a very unique idea.
I'm probably the only one up here who's going to tell you I'm not running. I did have some invitation to think about it. A good friend of mine, John Nichols, had suggested, I think somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but somewhat seriously too, about running as a progressive in the Republican primary. It was an intriguing idea. One of the things that I found particularly interesting, I don't know how many of you had a chance to look at the Blue Book this year, there's a wonderful section on Wisconsin's progressive history. And I was astonished as I started reading to discover in 1911, a Republican legislature with a Republican governor with the assistance and support of Democratic Socialists from Milwaukee passed progressive income tax, regulation of the railroads, workers' comp, recall referendum, and initiative, and some of the most sweeping and progressive legislation in the history of this country. And I thought, now that's my kind of Republican. But, you know, the other thing that was a very formative experience for me, I served for a time as coordinator of the Wisconsin Governor's Conference on Children and Families under Lee Dreyfus. And we had over 1,000 delegates from all over the state, all but 2 of Wisconsin's 72 counties that came to Madison for 3 days, mostly at their own expense, to talk about issues related to children and families. And the second week I was on the job, I got a visit from a group of ladies from a group called Eagle Forum, Phyllis Schlafly's group. It's sort of way off there on the right. And they were quite upset. They felt they'd been shot out of a conference 2 years earlier. And they want to make sure that didn't happen again. So I said, so what committee would you like to serve on? Which took a little wind out of their sails. I said, of course you understand that we want to make this conference genuinely representative of the diversity of families in Wisconsin. So, of course, we want you to be involved, but we're going to be asking a lot of people who may have very different opinions from you to be involved as well. Can you live with that? And we put together an outreach committee of 35 people, sent out 38,000 mailings to garden clubs and Kiwanis and groups all over the state. We had over 8,000 people who had applied to attend a 3-day conference at their own expense. We were able to sort of winnow it down to 1,000 delegates using a computer program to match the demographics of the people who had applied with the congressional districts that they came from. But the point is this, what came out of that was really a revelation, an encouraging one. And that was that when you sit people down and you ask them to take off the labels, and you ask them to talk about what do we need to do and why aren't we doing it now, on a lot of issues there's fundamental agreement. People want good jobs, good schools, safe communities. They want affordable health care. They want a clean environment, and they want fair taxes. And that's almost universal across the spectrum. So the real question is, why aren't we getting it? To sort of summarize and sort of get to the point here, the reason I guess that I have decided not to throw my head into the ring is, for me, the bottom line, most fundamental thing is giving the current governor a pink slip. I think we need to have some new leadership. And so, basically, after giving it some thought and some consideration, and there were parts of it that were frankly appealing. The idea of being able to really confront Scott Walker on a number of the issues was certainly an appealing thing, but bottom line is, I think we need a new governor here, someone who can win. And I think my concern in running an independent candidacy, or even as a progressive in the Republican primary, is that it might take away some resources and some time and some energy from one of the candidates, hopefully one of the candidates up here, who we hope and expect to win and to be our next governor. The bottom line is, I think when you're thinking about voting, when you're thinking about election, you need to think about this. It's not about me. It's about you, it's about our families, it's about our kids, it's about our grandkids. It's about the kind of future, the kind of state, the kind of country, the kind of world we want to leave for them. I think one thing that everybody shares in common as well, across the spectrum, I think everybody wants to be able to turn over their kids and grandkids a world at least as good as the one they inherited. And there's a real fear, I think, left and right, across the board, that we're not going to be able to do that. I think that's part of the challenge. I think we need to work together, we need to push, we need to be clear, we need to have transparency in everything that we do, and we need to make sure that everyone understands that democracy is not a spectator sport. We need to get involved, we need to connect, we need to be talking to friends and neighbors, we need to be talking to strangers, we need to be listening. It's terribly important to start the process of rebuilding community, of rebuilding connections. When it comes time to turn people out for an election, a stranger knocking on somebody's door with a piece of literature that someone does probably never see again is not as effective as a neighbor or a friend or family member, taking the time to talk to them over the fence or get together over tea and talk about the kind of choices that we face as a state. And with that, I will turn the microphone back and say thank you. It was a fun but very short run.
Thank you. And turn around for just one more minute. He might have been good on the Republican ticket. Look, he's got money coming up. I have a question that comes from Mr. Nate Tim of Mazomanie, and I'm going to ask it to all the presenters. So this is the question. The Wisconsin Grassroots Network is committed to organizing and empowering participatory grassroots groups throughout the state. How would you envision relating to these entities both as a candidate and as a prospective governor? Kathleen, would you like to go first?
Well, from the description of my life that you well know, I have spent my lifetime fighting to make government more responsive to all of us. Starting out at Wisconsin's Environmental Decade 35 years ago, suing government and suing big and powerful special interests to make it responsive and follow the law and protect our natural resources. So for 20 years I helped citizens in every corner of their state take on big and powerful institutions, because each one of us alone doesn't have the power to get that kind of social justice result. And then I was an assistant attorney general after the public intervener office was eliminated, and one of my assignments was the open meetings and public records law. So it is a basic bread and butter to our open government here in Wisconsin. So when the March 9th madness happened, in that dastardly deed with our senator here helping on our side, but with that Governor Walker just ramming through with those Republican senators, the abolishment of 50 years of collective bargaining rights in Wisconsin, that's brought a middle class and made our lives better, this generation. I was the first one. The next day I filed a complaint with the district attorney, and then I filed the very next day a lawsuit. First lawsuit filed. Took some heat for that in Dane County. What's the county executive filing a lawsuit on open meetings laws and public records violations of the legislature? I took some heat. I did it because I stood up. People have to stand up when there is an abuse, and I did. And so that's the kind of governor I will be. And just to finish in my time allotment here is, I am already promising that if I am your governor, it will be an open, honest, and transparent. That's why I'm answering questions no matter how tough and where they are, because you deserve to know where we stand when times are tough, when it isn't easy to stand strong. And so I will, my calendar will be public, unlike Scott Walker's. And the only reason we know he's in Florida is because of Facebook. It's bad enough that he's out of the state raising these unforeseen amounts of money from billionaires and millionaires instead of working here for us. But the fact that he's on our dime and we don't know where he is wrong. And so my record and my schedule will be public.
Thank you. Okay, here's the same question for you. The Wisconsin Grassroots Network is committed to organizing and empowering participatory grassroots groups throughout the state. How will you envision relating to these entities both as a candidate and as a prospective governor?
Engagement, constant engagement, just like we are doing here. Being a governor is not the end, it's just the beginning. So my plan would be to constantly engage not only grassroots organizations, but everyone, just even the public, every so often, and large organizations who come together under the umbrella of a grassroots platform. I would probably hold, I can see every 6 months or so, have a meeting, meet the governor, and where I can explain what we are doing, why we are doing, and that's a platform for exchange of ideas. It is said so on my website. It's one of my agenda items. My website is trivedi.com, and it's there, active public participation. So the governor is not the CEO of a corporation. The governor is an employee of the people. As an employee of the people of Wisconsin, I will constantly and actively, continually come to the people and explain our positions, what we are doing, why we are doing. And it's not that everyone's going to agree on everything. It's impossible. In fact, it's probably unhealthy to agree on everything. Because that just is not possible in a democracy. But the important is to engage and state one's stance and explain and exchange the ideas.
Okay, you already heard it.
Thank you. My campaign is about the grassroots. Everyone here belongs to an organization that has been involved in the grassroots, and although many of the organizations you belong to are nonpartisan, that organizations themselves won't endorse, that doesn't mean that you yourself can't get involved. And if you've been to my website, you'll know that I talk about turning my campaign over to my volunteers. And that's exactly what's happened. That's what happened here today with people who said, hey, I have an idea, I'm gonna do this. That's the way our campaign is gonna run. It is definitely from the bottom up. And I strongly believe that that is the way we are going to beat Scott Walker. And that theme must continue into whoever becomes governor in the governor's conference room. If you've ever been to one of the most beautiful rooms in the Capitol, this is a very ornate governor's conference room. And on the ceiling in the governor's conference room is a saying that says, the will of the people is the law of the land. And we need a governor who listens to the people and does the will of the people. And I pledge to be that kind of governor.
Thank you. Well, we have time for a couple of questions from you. Can I see a show of hands of anybody who has a question? Okay, Sean.
Yes. In the last year, at this time, as we know, the bomb that was dropped by Governor Walker was to end collective bargaining. And one of the criticisms of last year's recall of the senators last year is the lack of mentioning of collective bargaining. And just like the children's fable of felling the cat, which one of you at this time to make that commitment, if you're governor, the first step you're going to take is to restore collective bargaining?
You want to each answer that?
Sure. Thank you. Yes, and I have said it loud and clear for the whole last year. As I have worked on the Senate recalls last summer, the trainings of volunteers this fall, the recall we just all finished for the whole last year, as my wonderful former state legislator for 16 years, Peter Bach, and I helped in every corner of the state, I would regularly get asked. And this is before we knew we were going to recall a governor. How do we restore collective bargaining? What's the process? How do we do it? And so sometimes people would say, gee, can the governor do it by executive order? And the governor cannot do it by executive order. The governor does not have that power. And sometimes I would say, darn it, but then I think, oh my gosh, if a governor could do that by executive order, just think what the state would look like right now. And then they'd say, well, can't the governor call a special session? And I said, well, sure, a governor could call a special session, but nobody has to come. It's the legislature that has to call itself into coming, and that assembly, Republican Assembly, I don't think is going to call itself into special session to repair collective bargaining. So, I've been doing this for 40 years. And so the only way I know how to do it, and nobody's come up with another idea, but if you got one, the whole state is all ears. The way you do it, the only power a governor has, and it's an important one, is the budget bill. There's a reason Governor Walker eliminated collective bargaining in a budget bill. And so I have told citizens for the whole last year when asked, how would you do it? I said, if I were governor, you put it in the budget bill, and you've got to be willing to stand up and say that you'll go to the mat. Because if not, It's just another one of those promises of things you care about, but doesn't get done. And that's why I will promise that I will put it in a budget bill, and I will work my best to get it done. And I'm taking it. Thank you. I try to use respectful language. Because at the end of the day, the only way you honor what has happened in the state for the last year, and tearing us apart, the work, the sweat, the values that we care about that generated this historic revolution, the only way you honor that is by going to the mat, and I will do it. And it's not done then. We will elect a new governor in 9 weeks, and I hope I am your new governor, but it isn't over then. And I know you're not too tired, and I know you will not go away, because then what we have to do is we have to remind our whole state of why collective bargaining is important. I'm the granddaughter of a bus driver. I got my grandfather's union pin. I learned early on. It's why I became an environmental advocate for little people. No one of us is powerful. The only way we can be strong is by being together. And I have a better life, and you have a better life, because the generations before us put their lives on the line, the right to organize and the right to bargain. So we have 40-day work weeks. We have a fair day wage for a fair day's pay. And we don't get discriminated against for being a woman or for being black or for our religion, because people before us bargained for those protections. And that's why we have to remind 5.5 million people of why that's so important. And that's why I believe we will win and we will restore collective bargaining.
I'm firmly in favor of restoring collective bargaining. I think it is an extremely divisive and an extreme step that this administration has taken to take away these rights, and they need to be restored. There is, as Ms. Falk mentioned, the governor does not have executive power, so it has to be a legislative bill, and I think I would engage the legislature and to bring this back to the table and send a bill back which everyone can work with. The Democrats were willing to negotiate. They were calling from Illinois to negotiate, but the governor and the Republicans refused to negotiate. And we have to show them the benefits, we have to show them the middle path, and we have to bring a bill back which will work for the people of Wisconsin.
The soonest a budget could pass with collective bargaining would be June of 2013. If the worst happens and we don't take back the Senate, or don't take back the Assembly and take back the Senate, and we have a divided legislature, it's possible that the budget wouldn't pass until October of 2013, which is exactly what happened the last time that situation happened. I believe that the collective bargaining issue must be resolved, and it must be resolved sooner than that. I would suggest that day one, when I begin to have conversations about the very difficult problems the state faces. If you read my columns, you know I've spent a lot of time on the audit committee looking deep into the programs and the problems the state faces. There's a whole lot more bones buried where those columns came from, and that stuff is going to come out during the campaign. And what people are going to understand by the end of this campaign is that our state government has really deteriorated under Scott Walker. And the only way we're going to solve this problem is if we come together to fix it, and that means lifting up the voices of the state employees who have the wisdom and the knowledge and the experience and the training to solve the problems. And bringing those people to the table to collectively bargain is like 101 to employee management, labor relations. It has to happen. It's part of the problem that we absolutely pushed away our public employees who have the answers to solving the difficult problems we face. So what I would do is begin by changing the tone. Have the discussion around the state about how we solve the problems over and over and over again. Remind citizens of the wisdom and experience of the people who work for state government, work very hard to keep the people, because we're losing massive numbers of people in state government right now because they are not respected. And then as soon as possible, I would say at least by February, pass the bill as a standalone bill resolving the problems of Act 10 and fixing collective bargaining. This is a bill that I co-sponsored. It's already out there. We actually tried to bring it to the Senate floor this week. My colleagues are very committed to doing it, and we need to find the votes. And you say to me, oh, we can't find Republican votes. And I say to you, oh, but we can, because we already have some. Out there, people have said, oh, Kathleen, you're not willing to go to the mat to solve this problem. That's absolutely false. I went to Illinois to try and stop what was happening. I'm not opposed to any of the things that my opponent has talked about. I'm not opposed to vetoing the budget, but I think we need to resolve the acrimony, and all that does is take us to the brinkmanship that I don't think we need to go to right now, because I think the people of the state want this resolved a lot earlier. And that's what I'm going to work for first and foremost. Thank you.
We just have a few minutes left, and so I don't think we should take any more questions. But what I would really like to do is have some final words from each of our three candidates here, because it's really important that they're able to get their word out there. So would you like to start? Would you give a minute?
I'll be very brief. When we are the change we want to see, our communities change, our state changes, and we change. And we can change this state one person at a time by saying we are going to be the change we want to see. And we can start it right here, right now, this afternoon. Thank you.
All I want to say is I will stand for what I believe in my heart and my soul of what is right, regardless of where that idea comes from. It doesn't matter whether it's Democratic, Republican, Independent, but what is right is what is right. I will support that and stand for that. I have what I stand for. I've laid out on my website. I invite you to please visit it, and it's there in black and white, and none of that, what I say, will change. That's all.
You know, one of the issues we haven't talked about in our last hour is one that I know is this cloud looming over our state. We've never had a sitting governor for whom visits the DA in Milwaukee County. It's the nicest way I can put it, right? I mean, this is such a historic year for so many reasons, but that one is really one of the saddest. To have a sitting governor who yet till this day has not answered any questions surrounding the fact that his highest chosen aides, staff, as he was county executive in Milwaukee, and have been accused of just the most saddest kind of crimes. I mean, stealing money from veterans' families, or his high-level staff who are literally sitting feet from his office in the county executive office and are accused felony charges for doing political work to enhance his political career on taxpayer dime, feet from his office. Now, any of us in an office sitting feet from people for year after year kind of know what your colleagues are doing. So I'd like to know, Governor Walker, what did you know? When did you know it? And why didn't you do something about it? And so I'm running for governor because we can do better, we need better, and I'm eager to go to work for you. Thank you.
And for participating. I think there's one thing we've learned in the last year. It's that who you vote for matters. And also, if you don't go out to vote, it matters. And so I want to thank all of the candidates for their time, and anybody who left their keys lost their keys can see the lady in the green sweater. She has them there. And I also think we have a word from Mr. Nate Tim.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank the candidates for being with us today. A couple more words, just a few words before you go. First of all, if you have evaluation forms, there's a box out there that I showed you this morning. Be sure you put your forms in there. We want you to fill them out because that's how we figure out how we can do a better job next year. The next year's session will be the 16th of February, Saturday the 16th. So mark your calendar, tell your friends. We will have a social time following this at the Feed Mill Restaurant. And you might even be able to get a meal or two. We've signed all the people up that we could, but you might be able to sneak in a few more, so you could ask them. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.